Morning, everybody. I'm super excited to welcome Roman Kirsanov, CEO of Partner Insight. Roman, welcome.
Welcome, Sugata. Thanks so much.
I know.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah. I know we've been going back and forth for a while. You invited me to an event in San Francisco, a cloud event. Sorry I couldn't make it, but I've been watching you. I've been following you. There's a lot to talk about. But before we get going, would you like to take a minute and introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. I'm Roman, founder of Partner Insight, and I started my career as an entrepreneur. All right, I sort of built some stuff, and this is like who I am. And then I led go to markets in a bunch of tech companies and had a chance to work in big platform companies with like hundreds of millions of users. Had a chance to work on a big telcos, sort of focusing on B2B as well. And then up to business school, I started Partner Insight, this idea to build partner management, help to manage partnerships, right? And so we built partner management platform. And then over time, cloud marketplaces became so dominant. So I focused on that and I started writing and covering in many different ways through my insights and launched different courses, and we'll talk about that. So now what we do a lot of training for alliance leaders. I write newsletter, which has like 1,000 of people, and that's it.
Awesome. So let's go back a little bit to your telco days, because telco has changed a lot, immensely. Not just landline and cellular and satellite, but also that had gone into voice, video, data, a whole bunch of other stuff, right? So can you talk a little bit about like how did that space evolve from your career perspective, and where do you think it's now? And before we're going to get into marketplace, because it's all powered by connectivity.
Yeah.
So I think I would love to know a little bit about your perspective.
I mean, frankly, it was like a long time ago, and I almost like flipped that page. I think telco is plumbing, boring business. It's these days. It's obviously very important and critical, but at the same time, it's infrastructure, and as much as it's critical as it is not, it doesn't have as much energy as software does, right? So it was like me helping one of the largest company to sort of figure out go to markets and helping them right size the company. It was like transformation efforts together with McKinsey for a couple of years. It was fun because it has scale. But I remember when I started business school, I was speaking with investment banking in London, kind of asking them, hey, what do you think telco should do? And it was a time when telco was trying to figure out what they should do. And they say they should just focus on building the best pipe as possible. And I think it's interesting that we now sort of in the days when data center all of a sudden back to become top of mind. But yeah, I think software is so much more interesting, and I guess AI is the sort of software is kind of proves the point.
And so what did kind of, when you got into business school, what did lead to this for you to sort of form this company? How did you get started with Partner Insight? Why did you start?
I mean, like if you're a founder, you're trying to build things, and I guess you probably can relate to that, right? So you work in Zinfi, and there's so much potential and efficiencies and opportunities to improve partner collaboration and management and so on. And I think when you kind of think about it, it feels like kind of simple, like sort of straightforward. And I think many companies try to scale partner management software to become Salesforce competitors or something. And I think at that time when I was trying to build that, I guess we just didn't have enough kind of energy to figure this out. And I think at the same time, marketplaces and cloud go-to-markets became so much dominant, so I just couldn't miss it. And I think it's much more sophisticated, tech enablement, tech enabled, and interesting topic, I think.
So did you start from business school as more of an application provider? Were you trying to build an application?
Yeah, we built an app, and we had like customers and some good traction, and we raised some funding from some of the best investors. So yeah, I went through this entire kind of startup journey, and I had a chance to be part of some of the best, communities, like from mostly startup communities, but also sort of from the business school. And therefore, I guess like what we do right now we do a lot of training, but we also kind of build a little bit of community behind it. So
So do you have an application today?
technically we do. Technically we do have.
Okay, and then you have what, partners or brands, and who are the users in that application?
I mean, like these days, to be honest, we mostly focus on cloud go-to-market. We focus on helping small and large companies to figure out the growth on big hyperscaler marketplaces. So we're not focusing on partner management so much.
So let's start double clicking on the marketplaces, because you have a lot of expertise in there. You're holding a lot of events. So when you look back, like maybe 5 years ago versus now, what do you think is the same and what has changed?
I mean, look, we are kind of with you in the same industry, and you probably have more experience, and this probably would be a better question to you. But I think it's like completely obvious that if you compare with 5 years ago, there was a big question 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, right? Whether marketplace kind of will become a model for companies to distribute, right? And I think what actually I learned painfully as a software founder is that distribution is maybe 60 to 70% of success, maybe more. So I guess sort of 3 years ago, 5 years ago, marketplaces were kind of growing. A lot of people were questioning them. So now it's completely obvious that they are the thing. A lot of companies scale through marketplaces, and there's still some kind of nuances to that motion that a lot of companies are trying to figure out. But at the same time, it's so clear that especially big three clouds, AWS, Microsoft, and Google Cloud, became huge ecosystems over the last 3 years with the boost of AI and obviously other things that they've been doing. So I think it's like black and white now, in my opinion.
Yeah. So when you look at the hyperscalers, especially the three big ones, right? Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. Outside those, can you kind of walk us through what do you think other additional marketplaces are?
I mean, I honestly mostly focus on big three because I think there's some companies or communities that focus on one, and I think one is more than enough. Three is like quite comprehensive coverage. I guess there's a lot of companies. I mean, everyone is trying to build marketplace, right? I mean, if you're a software company, your like knee-jerk reaction used to be to build a marketplace, and I think some people who haven't kind of spent some time thinking about or like working with like these big three cloud providers may compare their marketplace with your own marketplace, but it's entirely different scale, right? I've been writing about cloud commitments, which is one of the drivers of big three cloud marketplaces. And if you think about just number, so cloud commitments of these three clouds are on track to hit $500 billion end of this year, maybe beginning of next year. So just think about this number. Like I think it's like huge, big three, and then some other companies like Oracle and Salesforce and others like Atlassian also have marketplaces. Pax has as well. So distributors, but I think they kind of very small compared with this big three.
So let me kind of double click a little bit on these big three. So if you think about these big three, are there nature of applications, whether it's cybersecurity or data or communication, they tend to be more clustered on one? Like, are they more, if I'm in cybersecurity, should I focus more on Azure? Or if I'm more of an app provider, I should focus on more Google Cloud? I mean, how do vendors pick, like a brand pick which marketplace is right for them?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of thoughts. One of them is that following your customers is always good principle. Number two is it used to be like when marketplaces started, obviously there was a lot of like infrastructure and closed infrastructure software which got like initial traction, right? Like obviously cybersecurity, different clouds have different strengths. So for example, Google is sort of more like AI, and there's some retail companies that scale on Google that do not scale on others, for example. But now I think what we've seen is that more and more companies are becoming multi-cloud. and more companies sort of just follow their customers. And I think there's a new kind of motion when AWS, for example, opened up the marketplace for others who are not built on AWS. I mean, this some like we can talk about nuances of retiring cloud commitments, but so on. But I wrote a bunch of case studies, for example, about Content Square, which is digital marketing company, and you would never think about digital marketing company scaling on cloud marketplaces, which is like it's not cybersecurity, it's not something else, right? So I guess there's a big shift towards marketplaces, in my opinion, across different sectors.
So going back to what you just said earlier, that follow your customers. So is it more logical for a brand to build its own velocity and get a customer base before they move to marketplace, or do you see also brands that they start with marketplace and then build out, their velocity outside the marketplace?
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess a lot of companies are asking like, or like they is marketplace's discovery engine or not, right? Is it like in the same way like you would put your product on Amazon.com, or like you build your website, you put it on the internet, and you're like, okay, great. So now I I should like wait for customers to find me. And I guess unfortunately it not always work like that. Sometimes it happens, but more or less all the time, like the majority of time, you need to figure out a way how do you get customers to notice, even if you're on marketplace. The thing that a lot of companies are doing, and that's why like all this cross-sell term, right, came to so much prominence, is when they talk with customers, even like outside of marketplace, and they would say, "Hey, Mr. Customer, would you like to buy my software?" And they would say, "Yeah, possibly." And they would say, sellers would say, "Hey, do your procurement department, do you like buy through one of these marketplaces? Do you have cloud commitments, or do you have like history of buying through these marketplaces?" And this is actually unlocks sale, and essentially marketplaces are started as a procurement transaction vehicle, right? And I think they more and more trying to move to building a flywheel and become a discovery. So I think it's like a sort of nuanced question. I haven't answered it. It's like really, and you can probably go deeper into that.
Yeah, so I kind of want to dial back, like 30 years ago, even 10 years ago, if you're a hardware provider, you're selling through a reseller network or a VAR or whatever, you'd build your motion, then you go to a disty to
Mhm.
really carry your product to extend reach, right? Go into different countries, different markets, different segments, and you would fund the disty with funded heads, programs, and etc. to go recruit reseller, train reseller, but they would have an infrastructure. It was very, very hardware centric. And then when software came about, this is where it would, literally on an Excel spreadsheet will store license keys, right?
Mhm.
But when SaaS came about, disties don't need to store license keys, right? So the value of the disty went away for SaaS. So do you see like that's what has happened is that if you're in SaaS, then these marketplaces are basically SaaS distributors. And therefore the way you have to build your motion, you have to build your brand with the old school disty. You have to do the same thing with a marketplace. But once you have a scale, then you can drive discovery. That was my question. Like, is the old world folding out? And so that's part one. And the part two of my question, which we may get later, is that when I look at, TD Synnex, Ingram, any of these guys, Arrow, right? Billions of dollars in revenue, 50, 60, 70,
Mhm.
but they're losing 2, 3, $4 billion because the software margins have shifted away to marketplaces, right? So we'll come back to the second question, but there's a shift that is happening from distribution for SaaS companies to the marketplaces. That was my question going back to when you're trying to build motions, what are the 2 or 3 things you have to consider from a readiness perspective, to go into this place? So do you have some thoughts on that? Like, how do I find out, am I ready for the marketplace? Because like the way in old school, you would not be ready with the distribution if you didn't have certain amount of velocity.
I think like these marketplaces, there's a lot of nuances in the question, and I think it's great. Just kind of point to go deeper. So I would recommend to think about marketplace almost like from almost any point in your maturity, right? So you should have a listing, at least on the cloud provider where you were built, right? And I think nothing really prevents you from I mean, there's no like really obstacles. I think if you want to double down on that, you need to build like a strategy, and this is what we kind of teach in the course. But essentially the idea is that you need to put deliberate efforts, just like you put in any marketing or like sales or like kind of different building different channels to get traction with that cloud provider. And you need to figure out, do you do like PLG strategy on marketplace, and then how do you drive traffic to that? Do you need to build cross-sell motion, and then so on? So I think it's a little bit different from disties. This argument that they are sort of competing, disties and marketplaces. But I think a couple of thoughts on this. Number one, you probably know better than me, is that the model of like resell is kind of like losing its prominence, right? The more value add services, more kind of different type of expertise required, and in this kind of new SaaS world. So, but at the same time, disties have a lot of scale, not kind of brand value and so on, and they can push your software where you wouldn't be able to get yourself, and therefore now hyperscalers, these marketplaces work with channel partners, including disties. Sometimes it's like uncomfortable kind of in the beginning, but they're figuring this out. And I think so. This still will continue to exist, and hyperscalers will also grow into prominence at the same time. I think they both actually trying to figure out what is the value that they provide to customers, and how do they, because I think some hyperscalers call DSTs scale partners, and I think this is what they are, right? But going back to your original question, do you need to get scale, brand visibility with DSTs and then go to marketplaces? I don't think it's the right model. I think what companies typically doing, they scale, and they at some point they get traction on marketplaces, they get traction sort of elsewhere, and then they, if you need to go to another market or you want to accelerate in some specific segments, locations, and so on, you involve DSTs to do that.
So let's go back to, I want to kind of draw the analogy between DC and marketplaces a little bit, even though they're fundamentally different. So in distribution, if you look at the history, and if I use an analogy of a value meal, in a value meal, you have a burger, you have fries or onion rings or Coke or milkshake, etc., right? And Disty traditionally sold the buns and the lettuce and the tomatoes and the burgers and fries and etc. separately, but they would put bundles together, and alliance marketing in most cases came through Disty. In marketplaces, right, people are talking about, Jay McBain talks about it, and other talks about this sort of value bundle. And I'm going to go to the commit discussion. Like, so if I'm going through marketplaces, do I need to start above and beyond what you just said? You can be in discovery, you can be in growth, you can be in scale in different phases to marketplaces. But do I need to focus on so-called alliance marketing or co-selling, co-marketing right from the get-go, or do I do that later? I mean, like, is everything part of a value meal in marketplace, or do things sold off lettuce, and buns and patties on its own, like the way you used to in Disties?
Yeah, I think great question. First of all, the good analogy, you like, why do you use Amazon.com?
Yes.
Right. So why do you use Amazon.com?
Because it's an aggregator.
Exactly. So it's convenient, it's easy, you have history, you have your credit card on attached, and you can buy everything in once, right? You have trust. And could you buy the same from 10, 20, whatever, 50 different vendors? You probably can, right? But it would be like painful, it would take more time, and so on. So I guess marketplaces is exactly built on the same premise. They are like ultimately trying to bundle, like kind of help customers to purchase software at scale with convenience. And I think they use cloud commitments to kind of build this flywheel. And I think now this all the attributes we just discussed about from e-commerce essentially, that are becoming more and more prominent. So, and I think we can go deeper into discussion on like what will happen in a year or like 2 years or maybe 3 years from now, when companies will deploy all these AI agents, right? How do they buy them? Where do they build deployed? They will all deployed will be all deployed, not all, but I think many of them will be deployed on marketplaces, through marketplaces. They will be built on top of cloud infrastructure, put as a listings, and you as a customer can buy them on one of the marketplaces. And just like together with all your other software. The question is, do you still need partners? And the argument is you do need partners, because partners have, and distributors as well, they have trust from the customers, and they have scale. They can put services on top of that, and you can also put this in different configurations and sell.
So one question I have, like if you think about, the buyers you took, follow your customers, from a functions perspective, are the marketplace buyers predominantly with IT background, or they're also people coming from business functions like finance or marketing or sales, or
Yeah,
who are the buyers in the marketplaces?
it's a good question, actually. I think the ultimate buyers are procurement departments, right? I mean, just like it depends on what type of software, what type of buyers. So, for example, in enterprise, if you sell enterprise contracts, procurement typically involved, right? So, I don't think that for like maybe public offers, essentially you just go and buy someone else software, which is like already has price on it and it's easy to buy in a couple of clicks. That might be IT buyers. But for like a larger contracts, I think procurement is involved, line of business is involved as well. And essentially, companies train their sellers when they sell to line of business, which is big part of the buyers, right? To just go and ping the procurement department, finance department, or like IT department who owns the cloud commitments. Because this is like we discussed, is a big part of the building flywheel that marketplaces kind of embedded to get this motion started.
So when you think about, I'm going to go back and use one of the old analogies again. Like when you look at someone like a Zone or CDW, online retailer, the way they evolved is that when product got commoditized, they sold on scale and they made margin on sales, and reseller channel couldn't fulfill. They would go do design, deployment, and etc. And buyers directly bought the product from CDW, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see the similar motion happening, that IT is going and procuring more commoditized stuff from marketplace because they're predictable and they have somebody else do the deployment, or the motion is different? If it's procurement driven, then I would think it's also price driven.
It's a good question. I think that both are true. Is that yes, procurement will want convenience, but at the same time, customers will want the best in class, right, for their specific problem. And therefore, there's a lot of conversation, even in our course, like about, because everyone is competing with everyone, right? So if you put like your own product in marketplace, there's a big chance that they have some sort of competing product. And again, knee-jerk reaction is not to put your product, like, because they already have a competing product. But if your buyer wants your product, I think overwhelmingly, like sellers, even in cross-sell motion that we discussed, we'll discuss, kind of put customer experience above their own product. So I don't think I haven't seen personally, again, given that I haven't seen everything, right? But I haven't seen like a big trend in terms of commoditization. And if you look at like distribution, how much hyperscaler services versus third-party services, it's like, let's say out of 20,000 listings that Amazon has, maybe, I don't want to put a number because I don't remember exactly, but it's like small percentage points of that is their own listings, and the number of third-party products are much larger. So I don't see like a trend for commoditization, frankly.
If you think about the value chain, you have brands, then you have distribution, then you have resell, and then you have end customers, right? That was the old model.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And distribution, going back to Adrian Slovatsky, because they had scale, they had buying power from the vendor and selling power to the partners, right?
Yeah.
So they control both end of that spectrum, the power dynamics wise. So when you take marketplaces in place, if they're going and pulling procurement relationships together from big buyers, right? Because money flow
Oh yeah,
downstreams, right?
100.
So are they shifting the power dynamics away from distribution, and distribution is becoming sort of a more
Yeah.
partner training, partner support organization, doesn't have control over the relationship, therefore doesn't have control over margins?
Right. It's a great question. So look, I think like very illustrative example of shifting power dynamic and shifting value dynamic is maybe comparing hyperscalers with another big company, Salesforce. Right. Salesforce was the first company that built marketplace before Apple did. Right. They built this AppExchange and multi-billion dollar company, a lot of, I think 5,000 products on the marketplace, maybe more. And what happened recently is Salesforce started selling on AWS Marketplace. And the question is, why would a company like Salesforce, with their own marketplace, would start selling on AWS Marketplace? And then now thinking about, I mean, maybe already expanding to others because of this shifting power dynamic, like I said, because, and Salesforce is actually one of the fastest growing listings in AWS Marketplace. They already transacted $2 billion through it, which is like pretty big numbers. And you wrote a case study recently. So these big three cloud providers accumulated so much, concentrated so much power. And if you look at market cap of all of them, they just went up versus everyone else. If you compare how much, I think last year I compared this big three cloud providers versus mCloud, which is Bessemer index. So these three clouds last year gained $2 trillion in value versus, which is like exactly almost exactly size of this Bessemer index, which is like all top SaaS companies, including Salesforce and everyone else. So that gives you probably an indication who is gaining power and who is not.
So let's kind of go back to a couple of words you said, because for our audience, I want to make sure you kind of explain what those are. You talked about private offers, you talked about commit. Can you talk a little bit about what those mean, how they work, and are they consistent across all three marketplaces, or do they vary?
Yeah, great question. So essentially, one marketplace started. The idea was, why don't we build Amazon.com of software, right? And Amazon.com software, I don't know, but I would imagine would look like, hey, everyone would put their software and everyone would just go and click and buy. But then what this hyperscalers discovered is that relationship matter, enterprise sales matter. So over time, hyperscaler marketplaces evolved, and now the majority of value, I wanted to say, is going through private offers. Private offers essentially enterprise contracts that you put through marketplace, which is may feel a little bit backwards, right? So why wouldn't you? Why would you go to marketplace if you still like have sellers involved? But this is like what happens, and this cross-sell relationship between you and cloud is now extremely important, especially if you sell into enterprise. And therefore, cloud commitments were used in the very beginning to accelerate this flywheel. And essentially, the way they work, if you as a customer have contract, like I sign contract, like for example, I'm a Snowflake and I signed like a $2 billion contract with one of the hyperscalers. So now I can use, depending on the cloud itself, either 25% of that or maybe 100% of that to buy solutions, third-party solutions, usually qualified or like eligible solutions on one of the marketplaces. So it's similar across all of them. It's not entirely identical, but this is how it's sort of structured right now. In addition to this private offers, there's what they call public offers, which is essentially normal kind of intuitive way, which was probably imagined in the very beginning. So you can go and buy, let's say, CrowdStrike product, right? Or like maybe like do like a free trial thing. This is more like public offers, and you can go and buy someone else software in already predefined price and start using it right now.
And then where does the commit come in? Like, how does the commit work? Where does that word fit in?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. I think sort of hyperscalers made the entire ecosystem to learn what is like RPO is, right? Like is essentially cloud commitments is if your company like Reddit and you use AWS, for example, you would at some point have a conversation with AWS and you would say, hey, your like cloud spend is one of our top 10 spend in the company. Can I get a discount maybe? And they will say, sure. But in exchange for the discount, they'll give you, I mean, it could be other way around, who is like approaching whom. You would get like certain obligations and you sign contract. I'm going to be using this amount, sort of put like a minimum for, and depending on the contract, it could be 1 year, 3 year, 5 years, for example. Typically, it's like a little bit longer term contracts. And what is super interesting is that hyperscalers enabled customers to use these cloud commitments, essentially like funds that they already kind of, it's like, it is, these are contracts. So these are not like kind of intentions. They sign contracts to use contracts to buy someone else's software on their marketplaces. Think about it. It's like, this is like as if you had a wallet with some money and then all of a sudden you can use this money to buy someone else's software. Not everyone is spending the entire cloud budget, so they may have like a leftover and they can buy someone else's software in a much more efficient, more predictable way. And finance departments are typically happy when they do that.
So if I bring back to the analogy that you used earlier, like you asked me, why do people go to Amazon.com?
Mhm.
So what I'm hearing from you is that, people used to go to Amazon.com for books, then they went for CDs, then they
Mhm.
went for house cleaning products, then they went for now Whole Foods. And so what I'm hearing from you, these marketplaces are basically trying to get more and more share of the wallet of the corporations when it comes to IT. Whatever they buy, first they get a base commit, which is kind of the Amazon subscription plan. You subscribe the consumables that you use every day that they get shipped to you. And then they are also saying, okay, you're going to buy $100 subscription, but if you commit another $50 of other stuff, I'll give you additional discount. Is that how?
Yeah, that is also true. That is also true. It's like, so like it builds like a flywheel, another level of flywheel, right? So if you buy like, let's say you have like certain cloud spend and now like you're adding to this cloud spend third-party products, you'll get, your spend is getting bigger, so you'll get like a bigger discount, and then you have more motivation to buy third-party products through cloud. So this is exactly how it works. And now like overlay on this, on all of these two things, one of them is that's with AI, like the cloud migration became so much ubiquitous, or like there's no questions that you do need to go to cloud to use AI sort of at scale in full and so on. So this migration is like accelerated. And the second, like I mentioned, like think about all these cloud like AI agents, how they're going to be deployed and distributed.
Let's talk a little bit about that. So this is a great way, possibly, to wrap our conversation for today. Is that the future is definitely driven by a lot of these agents that are tried, tested, and proven, on certain applications.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you see that's evolving out? Because it started with applications. Now the hardware providers are in the marketplaces. It was just not just software, hardware. There are service providers in marketplaces. And let's talk about sort of this future labor, which is agents. How do they show up, and are they already showing up? How does that work?
No, I think marketplaces is just perfect infrastructure and way for companies to build these agents and also to deploy these agents and also to sell these agents. So like for example, Google Cloud Marketplace, and I'm about to release like a podcast we did with GCP about the AI agent marketplace, right? Is exactly this model. And personally trying to understand like how pie will be split, right? So for example, you still like if you like a software company and you probably will still have like sales outside of marketplaces, sales together with clouds. There's some like self-deployed thing, right? I mean, AI agents is like fascinating things because we talk about disties, but there's a lot of service providers, channel partners who have a lot of services. Now they can package them in agents and deploy through Marketplace potentially, right? Like think how this will accelerate things. So yeah, I think we head into the fascinating future.
So if I take a simple two by two, right, you have like the infrastructure players, the marketplace player, like Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and then you have application provider on the other end, whether it's Salesforce or SAP or even
Mhm.
smaller companies, like then you go to Zscalers and etc. When it comes to agent today, if you have to do sort of a scatter plot, is it more skewed towards the y-axis where the individual brands are releasing agents, or you see is it more Copilot centric or Gemini centric? Whether it's what like where are the agents like just in the
No,
moment
yeah,
today? Where are the more agents coming out?
it's a great question. I think it's like really hard to tell, to be honest, because I think all big cloud providers now sort of either released or about to release some. They have like Foundry, Microsoft has Foundry, Google Cloud has AI Agent Marketplace for a while now, and they sort of doubling down on that. And then also like Salesforce and ServiceNow and everyone else is like building agents. But for me, if I like, I'm wearing sort of customer hat, right? And if you start wearing customer hat and you kind of start thinking, okay, like, yeah, I'm a customer, let's say enterprise customer, like no, maybe not huge, but still sizable. Where would I put my trust and where my data already is? Because you need all the data environment. I think hyperscalers could be like one of the answers, like Salesforce could be another, right? Where your data is. Sort of the data gravity and some technology and trust and simplicity would be some of the answers. For me personally, we had an event recently and we brought Glean, right? One of the companies that's what was the fastest, that's like one of the fastest that got to like 100 million ARR. And they scaled on Google Cloud Marketplace 42x year on year. So, and essentially, the more I kind of think about it, the more AI companies will be deployed there. But yeah, I think that the future is really interesting. I think fundamentally we can think about it. It's not like I mean, we should not think about it as like someone win and necessarily someone else will lose, right? I think the pie is getting much bigger. Yes, these big three cloud providers, they build huge ecosystems, and the power is like going up and up. But at the same time, I think the pie itself is getting so much larger. So I think there's going to be enough space for everyone.
That's amazing. So, Roman, I have one last question. What's your vision for your own company over the next 12 to 18 months? What are you trying to do?
It's a great question. So we want to be like the source of insights and training and some good events and maybe a little bit of community for people who are like in alliance leaders and cloud go to market leaders who want to scale on this big three hyperscalers. And this is what we do through our newsletter, our cloud go to market leader course, our YouTube channel, and a bunch of other things that we've been doing. So please follow us on through my newsletter. Probably would be the easiest way to do that. And yeah, I think it's fascinating time. And for me, I'm just super curious how this will unfold, because I'm super passionate about partnerships, but also technology and this kind of new iteration of kind of marketplaces enabled by AI. I think all of this will produce like really interesting, not only products, but also go to markets motions.
Well, with that note, it's been an amazing hour. Thank you for being here. I'd love to have you back because there's so many other questions I have that we didn't get to. But, we have 30 Fortune 100 companies, few hundred mid-market enterprise deployment. I sincerely hope they would reach out to you as they try to figure out their go-to-market strategy, which has to incorporate marketplace some form or shape. So, Roman, thank you.
Thanks so much, Sugata. It was a great conversation. I think we sort of barely scratched the surface, and thank you for covering this topic, because I think, however you slice it, you need to kind of get a good understanding, right? And I'm talking to about like listeners of like what's going on in the ecosystem, who are the big Jim McGuinn likes to talk about stars, right? Who are the stars that emerging or like already emerged? Because otherwise you're gonna miss like the path.
100%. Well, Roman, thank you. Thanks for being here. Talk to you soon.
Thanks so much.